Welcome to Vigilant News for December 20th, 2021. I'm Justin Deschamps, founder of Stones in the Storm. I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan DeLarme from Underground Newswire. Ryan, how's it going?
It's going well. Always a pleasure to be here.
We've got another action-packed show for you today. Ghislaine Maxwell trial has closing arguments. The leading cause of death is fentanyl for a very disturbing age group you're definitely going to want to stick around for. We have VAX investors, the people who are investing in the vaccine, some really seedy things you're also going to want to take a look at. And lastly, we have a big pedo bust that happened, despite the fact that the Atlantic would lead you to believe that there's no such thing as child trafficking. So definitely stick around for that. Before we get started, go to the description, check out the links. We have another Ascent sale happening where you can get amazing coffee like this. It's delicious, no mold. Did you know that most coffee, especially in the United States, has mold? Well, not this stuff. Check it out. 10% off your first order. I am also funding Patriots. As a matter of fact, I have about 2 to 3 days left to work with. I just funded another 2 businesses, so definitely check me out. Go to the link in the description. Send me an email to justin@romello.business. That's justin@romello.business. Tell me about your business. As long as you've had existed in 2019 or 2020, you filed tax returns, and you show some amount of gross income, I can get you a loan at dirt cheap prices. So I need your business to be funded so that you can help fight the globalists. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started for our first story. Ryan, what do you got for us?
Well, we are in the home stretch now in regards to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. It kind of seems like it's a placation production for the people, We're going to put Ghislaine Maxwell on trial. There, we did it. Here's a little slap on the wrist. And then that's it. But we'll see. The closing arguments were heard today. That is Monday, December 20th. On Saturday, the prosecution announced that its summations could last up to 3 hours and the defense could last just as long. And that was a pretty accurate assessment, as that's basically what it took up all day today, pretty much. On Friday, we didn't do a report, but just to catch you up to speed on some of the stuff that took place, we had Maxwell declining to take the stand last Friday after her defense called just a handful of witnesses. Last week, Maxwell's lawyers begged the judge for more time to locate witnesses, saying, "Our client's life is on the line." Defense attorney Laura Menninger told Judge Allison Nathan on day 12 of the socialite sex trafficking trial that they were struggling to find a witness named Kelly, whom they had issued a subpoena to testify. So they don't even have their witnesses in order, which, a case that's this high profile, you think they would have all their T's crossed and I's dotted, but it seems like they had witnesses bailing on them, which is kind of hilarious. And that could be an indication of people's unwillingness to go along with this, or it could just go to show that this whole thing has just been sloppily put together just to placate the public.
Yep, lots of ways to look at it.
Yeah, we don't make any claims, either way, but just reporting what it looks like from our perspective. So Maxwell's lawyers called 9 witnesses over 2 days, which is not that much for a case like this. On Friday afternoon, Maxwell spoke to Judge Allison Nathan to answer a question that has been plaguing observers since the trial was announced. Quote, "Your Honor, the government has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt, so there is no need for me to testify," she told the judge. Attorneys will present their closing arguments on Monday, today, which they already have. So today we had 4 of Ghislaine Maxwell's siblings show up to court. Kevin Maxwell, Isabel, Ian, and Christine. We showed a picture of the family in an earlier stream, but we have another picture of them now, a little somewhat humanizing photo op of them arriving to court together. Look, we're all adorable. So Kevin and Isabel have been there for most of the days. They often chat and make eye contact with their sister during breaks in the proceedings. The prosecution gave their closing arguments today, reiterating allegations that Maxwell acted as Epstein's right hand. Quote, "She was a sophisticated predator who knew exactly what she was doing," Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe told the jurors. Quote, "She ran the playbook again and again and again. She was a grown woman who preyed on vulnerable kids. So that's the prosecution's argument. New exhibits were also released today by federal prosecutors, including a video of the 2005 raid on Jeffrey Epstein's Florida mansion. If you check out the Underground Newswire article, we have a link to the independent video of that. We also have some new images that came out. So the materials also include several photos of a young Annie Farmer, who was one of Maxwell's accusers. That the disgraced British socialite gave her a nude massage and groped her at Epstein's New Mexico ranch when she was a teen. Let's see, the exhibits were made public just before the government and Maxwell's defense attorneys began delivering closing arguments. So we have the infamous twin torpedoes, which we mentioned, which if you know, you know. We won't elaborate any further.
It's not too revealing, but if you know what you're looking at, you know what you're looking at. We'll just leave it that way.
Yeah.
It's
fun holiday gift idea.
Yeah, exactly. I've got one going to my mom right now.
So in closing, the question of Maxwell's little black book was finally raised. This is the morsel that could potentially have geopolitical implications. It could go well beyond the scope of 4 accusers. But we in the trial, they only mentioned what was relevant to the case. So we have Maxwell's handwritten phone directory. This was brought up by Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe, that is the prosecutor who is not James Comey's daughter, in her closing statement as evidence of the accused madam's guilt. This book, Maxwell's book, proves to you that Maxwell is guilty, Moe told jurors, explaining that it corroborates testimony by a number of her accusers. Moe highlighted an entry for alleged victim Caroline, who testified that she was abused by Maxwell and Epstein starting at the age of 14. Caroline's entry in the book also included a number for her ex-boyfriend, Sean, who testified in day 3 or 4 of the trial. He testified that he would drop her off at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion and received calls to set her up with massage appointments. So that's probably the strongest bit of evidence they have that this is, more nefarious than the defense would have you believe. She was 14 years old at the time, according to her and her boyfriend. And I mean, some of these other accusers were, I think, 17, 18, and that might not play, but this is pretty damning, I would say.
Yeah.
Maxwell is guilty and you should convict her, pleaded Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe just before the court broke for lunch. After lunch, the defense began their arguments. We had defense attorney Laura Menninger telling the jury that Maxwell is an innocent woman wrongfully accused of crimes she did not commit. Ghislaine Maxwell is not Jeffrey Epstein, Menninger said, arguing that prosecutors are targeting the disgraced socialite because of their failure to bring Epstein to trial. Regarding the testimony of Maxwell's 4 accusers, the lawyer declared memories have been manipulated in aid of the money, which is very interesting. We'll have a lot to say about this in the coming week. But to not digress, let's continue. The defense has wrapped its closing argument, telling the jury that Maxwell is only on trial for her connection to Jeffrey Epstein. And apparently that all of these accusers' memories, 4 separate people just had false memories all at once, which is pretty crazy. It's unprecedented and it's cartoonishly preposterous that could ever be real. So Laura Menninger said, quote, "She's being tried here for being with Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe that was the biggest mistake of her life, but it was not a crime." I would say that groping the 14-year-old is probably a crime.
Yeah, exactly.
The prosecution will now have the chance to issue a rebuttal before Judge Allison Nathan, who, we thought was going to be kind of biased in this case, but, she did not allow the extension of the case when the defense couldn't find their witnesses. So, I mean, it's still, that aside, it still seems like kind of like they're just placating people.
Right.
Assistant District Attorney Maureen Comey delivered the government's rebuttal, closing argument for Maxwell's defense attorneys, which we don't have a lot of information on what was said exactly. She did slam the defense for trying to discredit the 4 women who testified that Maxwell groomed them for abuse by Jeffrey Epstein when they were in their teens in the 90s. If the alleged victims were out for a payday and wanted to frame Maxwell, They would have told way better lies, Comey told the jury. There is no massive conspiracy here to frame Ghislaine Maxwell, which was how they rested their case.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, at least in reviewing what we've shown to everybody here, that there's a lot of good reason to believe that Maxwell was not just the victim of circumstance because she dated Jeffrey Epstein. They also, Elizabeth Loftus, going to the stand and admitting that she has not successfully managed to falsify a sexual abuse memory is pretty revealing.
Yeah, I don't think we ever mentioned that either. That's another big thing.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, so the defense is arguing like, hey, there's this thing called false memories. Because there's this thing called false memories. Gee whiz, it could be all false memories. But they don't really argue that, at least as far as I understand. So, you know, when you're arguing a defense, so, just to put this in perspective as an epistemologist or somebody who studies epistemology, when you are trying to invalidate the argument that seems to be right, you have to explain the evidence in a factually beneficial way, or you have to have explanatory power. So if I tell you, hey, your food went missing from the refrigerator, and I had a picture of somebody who's stealing it, and you say, oh, no, that's not the case. You have to actually give me an explanation that better describes what happened, or at least does an attempt to do so. But just saying, oh, no, that's not true isn't enough. That doesn't actually invalidate the argument. And that's kind of seems like what they're trying to do here. They're just creating they're dancing around the idea that there might be reasonable doubt by talking about memory experts, by saying she's just a victim of a certain circumstance. But they haven't actually given a compelling argument, I would argue.
No, this false memory thing is a gambit that dates back to at least the 70s, I want to say. I think the Ted Bundy trial was the furthest back we could find Jane Loftus being called to the stand to, play the whole false memory card. In fact, this woman who we know a lot about, and we will be doing a deep dive on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. She has appeared in, I think, 300 and some trials. Mm-hmm. Typically somebody who is influential and powerful being tried for some kind of abuse. They bring in this gal. Her whole career is basically just coming into high profile cases and presenting this false memory nonsense, really, quite frankly.
Right.
Not that false memories don't happen, but it's just peripheral stuff. Not like the actual act of what happens. You can't make that up. You can't implant that. And she had, on the stand in this trial, said that she has, as of yet, been unsuccessful. So she kind of undid her whole entire life's work on the stand during the trial. But yeah, it's a gambit that goes back like half a century almost. So
yeah, and there's a lot of threads to unravel. If we do our job right, then we might have an explosive, like seriously explosive story. That really gives us an opportunity to deal a blow to the industrial grade gaslighting machine that has been weaponized against victims.
And we couldn't have done any of it without our dear friend Charles Whitfield, who wrote the book Memory and Abuse. And the first chapter outlines his battles with these people.
Right. Yeah. And there's another book we talked about in the larger stream called Victim, Survivor, Thriver. It's by Barbara Whitfield, and it's Carol's story. And it talks about a woman who essentially was the victim of this false memory foundation and a lot of the things that happened related to her. So
tragic.
Yeah, I'm really itching to talk about it, so I'm gonna have to bite my tongue. There is so much we've uncovered that is going to really give people, I think, a lot of tools to better sort fact from fiction and better understand memory, because part of the problem is the memory is a black box problem. So it's hard to know what you're dealing with, and you could either believe the victims and not do any more investigation after that, which is a problem, or you do the reverse, which you just dispel all the victims because it's hard to prove a memory event.
And then you compound their trauma by telling them it didn't happen.
Exactly. So lots of things that need to be carefully addressed here, and we're going to try to do the best job we possibly can unpacking this. But again, explosive story.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a live stream with our friend and colleague Paul, and we can all weigh in on this and talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, lots of good stuff there. So cool. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and jump into our next story, which is there was a massive child sex trafficking ring busted which ran for decades, protected by police in exchange for sex. Now, this is obviously horrific. I mean, you can imagine you're a victim of child sex trafficking, and you go to the police thinking they're going to help you out, only to discover that they don't help you out, and they could potentially ruin your life in another way if you don't keep getting abused, basically. Well, that's essentially kind of what seems to be happening here. 6 traffickers were arrested this week for running a Queens-based sex trafficking ring that trafficked young women and children from Mexico into the United States. One of those indicted in Brooklyn federal court was Putin County police officer who was protecting not the children, but the child sex offenders in exchange for sex. Horrific.
I don't know. That might be a false memory.
Yeah. What were we to say, right?
According to the Atlantic, it's all make believe.
It's all make believe. Well, I mean, this actually is a good example of why it's tricky, because really it's on the policeman's honor to do the right thing, just like it's on your parents, the parents' honor, or anybody who hears about victims. Because the bottom line is that if your child or somebody in your community was implicated in child sex activities, then it's not going to look good for you as a police officer. So you have one incentive to suppress it. And then if you also have high profile people in your community trying to hush things up, you got another incentive. It's a kind of double whammy incentive. It's, if you don't do what we say, we're going to ruin your life. If you do what we say, not only are we going to not ruin your life, we're going to reward you profoundly. So it's kind of like the what is it, the bargain that nobody can refuse, the thing from the Godfather.
Oh yeah, a deal that you can't refuse.
Yeah, something like that. So Wayne Pfeiffer, a Village of Brewster police officer, has been helping the human traffickers smuggle in children and younger women from Mexico for years. Just a sidebar on that. How is that made possible? Well, because we have lax border security. So, if you need any more reason to think that we need secure borders, which I could give you like a 12-hour talk about all the reasons why, this is one of them. If you have lax border security, if the people in a country don't really care about border security, then you know what happens? Undocumented people pour in the country and they get abused in many different ways.
I don't know.
Some of them children.
Sounds kind of racist to me.
I know, right? Yeah, who are we to the race of people who aren't U.S. citizens are really getting slammed here. The sadistic human smuggling scheme has been in operation for nearly 2 decades, since at least 2002, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District Court of New York. According to the indictment, Pfeiffer protected child sex trafficking ring in exchange for sex with victims. For years, Pfeiffer helped the ring avoid arrest, tipped them off to stings, and allowed them to abuse children and young women by exploiting the trust in his badge. According to the complaint, in exchange for the protection, Pfeiffer had his way with the trafficking victims, even bringing them to the police station where he would rape them. And I don't want to have too many seedy details, but as a psychology buff, as somebody who deeply cares about our society and studies all sorts of things, one of the things that keeps bad behavior going is that we often don't face the consequences. We don't want to hear about the icky fact that, in our own town, children were kidnapped and raped and abused and things like this.
How do you think that the false memories syndrome foundation people were allowed to do what they did for so long? It's like an easy out. It's like an off-ramp on the road to truth.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because if we don't at the very least investigate claims, knowing that we're probably going to find some false ones. Don't get me wrong. There are false claims that get made all the time. But we have to take the claim seriously enough that we can compel investigation, because if we don't, then crimes go unchecked for years. I mean, how is it that the Nazi and the German citizens didn't know about millions of people being gassed and killed or in their own neighborhoods and things like this? It's because they were conditioned to turn a blind eye. So I'm going to read a little bit of this because I want the graveness of this to kind of settle in with you a little bit so we can have some skin in the game. For more than 8 years, Pfeiffer allegedly directed members of Sid Hernandez sex trafficking organization and the Gondias prostitution business to deliver women to him, including the BPD police station, so that he could engage in sexual activity with the women at no cost to Pfeiffer. In exchange, Pfeiffer provided a Sid Hernandez sex trafficking organization and the Gondias prostitution business protection from the arrests, including by advanced warning of law enforcement operations and intervening to prevent arrests. I actually thought there was going to be a little bit more of a detail in there. I'll leave it at that though. But I'll just close this segment by saying it's these things are real. The child sex trafficking actually happens. And believing and seeing in this case, if we don't acknowledge that the possibility of these things might exist, we're never going to identify them. So be careful about this Atlantic article nonsense that we had last week. There's a vested interest that has gotten control of our media to downplay these claims and make them seem ridiculous. Because if they can kill the idea at the incredulity level, meaning that as soon as you hear it, you just knee jerk, oh, this can't be true because it sounds ridiculous, then they've won in a lot of ways. So hopefully we all have a little more courage to face what needs to be faced so we can end this horrific situation once and for all. And with that, that highly inspiring story, don't forget to get your coffee at Ascent Nutrition. Link in the description. Lots of amazing coffee they got there. This we just got this. Really good stuff. I've tried it before.
Kind of hard to see. But
yeah, it's kind of hard to see. I mean, we're working with what we got to work with here. If you want it to look like a better picture, support us and we can buy better equipment. But yeah, Ascent Nutrition, really good stuff there. Check it out. All right. And with that, what is the next one we got lined up?
Well, the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 45 was not COVID, and it was in fact fentanyl. So there was a group who did a study. I forget what their name was, but the group found that 37,208 people between the ages of 18 and 45 died from fentanyl overdoses this year. Wow. Oh, actually, no, in 2020. And 41,000 died so far in 2021. My best friend happened to be one of these people. So this is a subject that I take very seriously. Okay, the group is called Families Against Fentanyl. And I don't know who started this or even this group seems kind of shady in my opinion. But anyway, according to Families Against Fentanyl, the fentanyl deaths in America across all age groups doubled from 32,000 to 64,000 fatalities in just 2 years. Wow. Between April 2019 and April 2021. And what happened in that time period?
COVID.
Yeah. So I guess, it is COVID related, but it's not the specific cause itself.
All right.
So just like being honest about the adverse reactions from vaccines, raising a stink about fentanyl is going to do the exact same thing. And that's have a negative effect on these pharma companies' bottom line. And that's why you may or may not see anything come of it. Even this group, as I was saying, Families Against Fentanyl, what they propose would maybe mitigate the problem, but it would also, it's like fighting drugs with more drugs. This is kind of what they've proposed. So I would say that all we can really do is raise awareness. And I mean, I don't know. I don't think defunding the police is going to help with all of these fentanyl deaths by a long shot. But who knows what the right thing to do about it is. Awareness is literally all we can do. So
right. Yeah, it's unfortunate because, let's see, how much do I want to talk about? I'll just mention this. Opiates in general, from a psychopharmacological perspective, so the drugs that our body produces to, as we live our life, one of them is opiates. And so when you're having social interaction with people, one of the things that gets released is a little bit of a buzz, endorphins, which is an opiate, your body's natural opiate. So when you experience depression, isolation, profound anxiety, abuse, all sorts of things, then your natural source of the social drugs, you might say, get depleted. And so interestingly enough, people who have adverse childhood experiences or profound social isolation, PTSD, things like this, they tend to be more susceptible to drug addictions. So a lot of people over the past couple of years have been cut off from their social networks because of COVID. Or worse, you don't believe the narrative and now your family has abandoned you and you've had a lot of problems with your social connections. And that also creates a lot of problems. So it's no wonder that drug addiction has exploded in a lot of ways. So shame. And with that, we're going to do our last one. Did you want to jump in?
I was going to say it might be a good time to plug a movie that we recently recommended by Sidney Powell's Defending the Republic PAC. The movie is a documentary. It's like not the highest quality, but the information in it is is stellar.
Mhm.
The movie is called Doctor's Orders. We're gonna have a Rumble link in the description, maybe.
Yes, the Rumble link in the description. Definitely
Yeah.
check that out.
Check
I'll
it
also pop it on the screen for a second while we talk about it. Here it is.
Hey, and big ups to Sydney Powell for everything that she does.
Yes, exactly. It's already got 185,000 views.
Wow, yeah, it just came out too, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I haven't seen all of it, but
we saw a good, like, probably 60% of it though. And
yeah,
in that 60%, there was one little nugget of information that I thought was worth sharing.
sure.
When they were doing the original studies on hydroxychloroquine that the Lancet mentioned when they put out their bogus report,
Mhm.
they were using over four times the standard dosage in the
Wow.
trial to create an outcome. A lot of problems with these studies and modeling is that they are not paid to figure it out. They're paid to create certain results. And the
Mhm.
results they wanted to create was that hydroxychloroquine was damaging. To achieve these results, they gave over four times the recommended dosage to the people in the study. So the
Wow.
study was weighted, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
just like one little detail that they go over in the movie. So check it out and see what you think about that.
Yeah, this guy right here, Dr. Bradley Meyer, has a lot of interesting testimony. I'm proud that he came forward, even though he might have torpedoed his own career in the process.
Oh yeah.
But we need doctors to come forward, and thankfully, there's a lot in here.
He
to
does
chew
go
on.
over that how he came forward with his findings
Mhm.
and how he kind of got ostracized from the medical community and why that happened.
That's
and
right.
why that happens. He basically lays out exactly what doctors have to go through and like what they're up against if they want to use hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin to
Mhm.
treat their patients, which they've had great success with, but what exactly they're up against and why the hospitals and chief of medicines will basically just like stomp you out if you try to do it.
That's right. Yeah, the things that are in place to make this happen have been in place for a while, so they could use them again. So definitely check that out. Great documentary. Link in the description. It's called Doctor's Orders. It's Doctor's Orders. All right, and the last one we have for today is a story about, here it is, the VAX investors. So again, link in the description for all the articles we put out. And before we get started with this, just a couple of reminders. One, don't forget to help support us by going to Subscribestar. For as little as $3 a month, you can help support us. Price of a cup of coffee, basically. And we are also going to be doing a big stream on Wednesday, I think we decided, right?
Yeah, that seems like probably
Yeah.
a good time to do
We
it.
normally do our big stream on Thursday, but holiday and things like this.
Well, Thursday would be the day before Christmas Eve, so it's really up to you.
Yeah, we'll let you know, but
Yeah.
we're going to do our big stream here, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, so as mandates rolled out, dozens of politicians invested in VAX companies, directly profiting from their own policies. Isn't that interesting?
They wouldn't do that, would they?
No, it's not like there's a profiteering racket. It's not like we've talked about how they use every possible way to make money off of these insidious plans possible, and they have.
These friggin' jerk-offs.
I know it. Since COVID-19 pandemic began last year, the US government has poured billions of your tax dollars into the vaccine program. More than 9 billion of your tax dollars were given to vaccine companies for research, and 22 billion of your tax dollars were then used to support vaccine distribution. The feds also shelled out another 10 billion to expand access, and later announced 3 billion more to spend and add on an ad campaign to combat vaccine hesitancy, which is basically people are like, F you with these vaccines.
Mhm.
Billions more have followed, and in spite of some states being heavily vaccinated, they are still seeing massive spikes in hospitalizations. As a matter of fact, I want to say there's at least a couple studies out right now that suggest the people who are spreading COVID are the vaccinated right now. So this whole, the what is it? That's a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Yeah.
It's not exactly true. Allegedly, YouTube. As a result of billions of taxpayer dollars flowing into the coffers of Big Pharma, these companies have experienced massive windfalls, with Pfizer and Moderna seeing nearly exponential increases in stock prices. Adding to the insidious nature of using taxpayer funds to bolster the bottom lines of Big Pharma, these companies have taken a portion of these billions and used them to lobby against whistleblowers who would expose their crimes. Yeah, so these people, just put this into context. Pfizer literally told us, basically gave us the finger last, what was it, 2 weeks ago, and said, we're not going to give you any information for 75 years. Mind you, they're making god awful amounts of money since COVID release.
On that note, I think it was I forget who it was exactly, but they determined that it would only take 12 weeks to get all that information out.
That's
not
right.
75
Yeah,
years.
not take 75 years. They're doing this, although I don't know if they've admitted it, but you know, the writing's on the wall. They're doing this because whatever's in those documents and information is so damning. If it came out now, there could potentially be lynch mobs roaring around. It would piss the people off that much.
Oh yeah.
So,
and I don't know if you guys noticed, but it seems like our divine timing that this happens right after we mentioned the Pelosi insider trading. 14 members of Congress were found to be in violation of the Stock Act. It's just like one thing builds on another thing on another thing.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So it's no accident that these things are happening. But you know, the benefit to all of this, as we like to remind everybody on the show, is that the more that these things happen in a public way, the easier it is to convince people of the truth. So, and this is coming. So yeah, so that is basically it, ladies and gentlemen.
There is one last thing I wanted to mention.
Sure. Okay.
I don't know if you guys caught our COVID special we did not too long ago, talking about the pokes.
We got the video in the description, by the way, for facts.
But we had another sudden death. It was Andre Melendez. He was a minor league catcher. I think he was supposed to, I don't remember who he was going to play for, but he was like a rising star. He was definitely going to get picked up for the major leagues. But yeah, just passed away.
Wow.
20 years old, just dropped dead.
Wow, 20 years old. No kidding. Yeah, there he is. Let's see. I was going to try to pull up an article. There we go. Yeah, pretty shocking that this happens. I mean, unfortunately, the thrombotic, so it's thrombosis, that's blood clots in the body. There's a bunch of doctors that know about this. I don't know exactly what causes death. It could have been myocarditis.
Myocarditis, pericarditis.
Yeah. So various issues related to blood flow in the body, which is what apparently this vaccine and spike protein does, is it creates thrombotic issues. What was the name of that doctor? She's an old former Navy doctor. She's been making the rounds. No, she was on Alex Jones recently talking about how 5G can produce similar symptoms as COVID. But in any case, the point I wanted to make just briefly is that the circulation issues that people are experiencing from the vaccine, allegedly anyway, can happen also from just walking around to people who have been vaccinated. So, you know, in my experience, I'll just add to this. I have not been vaccinated in years, and I certainly didn't get the COVID vaccine, nor does anybody in my friend circle. But when the COVID vaccine started to become more prevalent, we all kind of had strange issues, including menstruation issues for my fiance. So yeah, this is affecting people. But the good news is you can have treatments and support your health using things like pine pollen and pine pollen extract. So definitely check out, again, Ascent Nutrition, link in the description. All right, well, with that, everybody, I think we have done a great show. If you have any tips, anything you want us to talk about for the big stream or just in general, definitely let us know in the comments. We always love hearing from you. Also, support us by going to silence-in-the-storm.com/donate to support our work. We could use all the help we can get. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. See you tomorrow.